Chol Maisecha B'Sefer Nechtavim.
That's right. Gitwach.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see the Heilige Gemara. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Reb Shimon Omer Echad Gagim. So before we start, we need to remember.
What daf are you?
I'm sorry?
What daf are you on?
Tzadik Aleph, Amud Aleph, halfway down the Amud by the two dots. Reb Shimon Omer Echad Gagim. So what I'd like to do is, Rabbi Yehuda was kind enough at the bottom of Tzadik Amud Beis to give us a really good synopsis of the three shittas in our Mishnah. So remember, Reb Meir said that you're allowed to take from Gag to Gag, and the Rabbanan said you cannot go from Gag to Gag, and Reb Shimon said it's a free-for-all. You can go from anything to anything. So Rabbi Yehuda categorized it very well, and the Art Scroll actually created a picture to illustrate it. So let's quickly review that because our subject matter today is based on that. So L'divei or Amar Rabbi Yehuda Cheshtim Tzalom L'divei Reb Meir. Reb Meir holds Gagin Rishus La'atzmon, which means you can go from Gag to Gag. Chatzeres Rishus La'atzmon, you can go from Chatzer to Chatzer, but you can't go from Gag to Chatzer. And Karfifois Rishus La'atzmon, you cannot go from a Karfif to a Gag or to a Chatzer, but you can go from Karfif to Karfif. L'divei Chachamim, Gagin v'Chatzeres Rishus Achas, you can go from a Gag to a Chatzer. You cannot go from your Gag to somebody else's Gag, but you can go from a Gag to a Chatzer. But neither of a Gag or a Chatzer is allowed to go to a Karfif. So Gag v'Chatzeres Rishus Achas, Karfif Rishus Achas. And Reb Shimon is a free-for-all. Kulon Rishus Achas saying everything's one big Rishus. So let's see what the Art Scroll drew for us, a very nice picture to clarify it, and then we can go on with today. So according to Reb Meir, the rule with this picture is you're allowed to cross a thin line, but you're not allowed to cross a thick line. So Reb Meir holds you can go from Gag to Gag, from Chatzer to Chatzer, from Karpif to Karpif, but not from one to the next. The Chacham held you can go from Gag to Chatzer, from Chatzer to Chatzer, from Karpif to Karpif, but from Gag or Chatzer you may not go to Karpif. Karpif is a separate category.
Even more so, you can't go from Gag to Gag.
You can't go directly, but you can go through the Chatzer.
Right.
So there's a way around it. So really, if you think about it, you get the most mobility. Oh no, between Reb Meir and the Chacham, you actually get more mobility out of the Chachamim, even though it's sort of indirect. And Reb Shimon holds it's a free for all. There's no Erev. Again, we're talking about Keilim that on Shabbos, when Shabbos arrived, they were not in anyone's home. When Shabbos arrived, they were outside in a Chatzer or anywhere else. You're allowed to move it anywhere without an Erev, Chatzeris, without anything. You're allowed to move things around. Those are the three shittas. So now the Gemara is going to build a little bit upon the different shittas. So let's see the head of the Gemara. Reb Shimon said Echad Gagin. Reb Shimon was the one who said it's a free. I use the word free for all because you can carry from anywhere to anywhere. Amarav, halacha Reb Shimon. The halacha is like Reb Shimon. So that means any keli that was in the Chatzer when Shabbos arrived, you could move it from Chatzer to Chatzer. So if you don't have any Erev and you have a beach chair that's in your backyard, you're allowed to pass it over the bushes and let your neighbor use it. Unless it's 10 tefachim, then you have other problems. But who shalo yirvu? So now Rav is putting in a caveat. That's only if none. Let's say we're talking about two chatzeres, Chatzer A and Chatzer B. Chatzer A has 5 houses in it. Chatzer B has 5 houses in it. So that's only if Chatzer A didn't make an internal Erev and Chatzer B didn't make an internal Erev. What's the significance? Because if no one made an internal Erev, then nobody's allowed to take any of their Keilim from their homes to their Chatzer, which means that any Keli that you find in the Chatzer throughout Shabbos, you can safely assume was there when Shabbos started, because there's no way anybody legally could have brought out any Keilim from his home into his Chatzer. So therefore, Rav says this halacha that you're allowed to move Keilim from Gag to Gag, Chatzer to Chatzer to Karfif is Shaloi Yirvu. If none of the individual Chatzeres made their own internal Erev, and therefore any Keli found in any of the Chatzeres or the Gagas or the Karfifis we can safely assume we're there before Shabbos. Aval Irvu, if one of the two Chatzeres made an Erev, or especially if both, then you're not allowed to anymore transfer Keilim from a Chatzer to a Karfa, from a Chatzer to a Chatzer. Why? Because Rinan Dilma Otzila Fuki Mani Debatim L'Chatzer. We're afraid that since in that particular Chatzer an Erev Chatzeres was made, so in that Chatzer you're allowed to take Keilim from any one of the houses into the Chatzer. So you might find a Keli in the Chatzer and you'll transfer it to the next Chatzer, and this Keli really originated in the house, and that would not be allowed. So to avoid that confusion, if any one of these two Chatzeres made an internal Erev, all bets are off. No, you're no longer allowed to transfer Keilim from Chatzer A to Chatzer B. That's Rav Shita. Well, Shmuel's more lenient. He said, Bein Irvu, Bein Shelo Irvu. It doesn't matter. We're not so worried. People will keep track of their objects, and if there's an object that was in their house that was taken outside, people are going to know about it. Today in shul, people wanted to make a tikkun with a kiddush, which is I believe today in shul, if you take out a bottle of brofen with a mezonis, the death penalty applies to it. So therefore, someone wanted to circumvent the rules, and he made it in the parking lot. So they pulled 4 chairs out from the shul into the parking lot, and they had their little ticket over there. But what happened? They were over another capital offense. They left the chairs outside. And, of course, someone did keep track. So people were able to keep track as to which of the chairs were outside before Shabbos, and which of the chairs were brought from the shul to the parking lot on Shabbos. And they were caught, and they're going to be suffering now the wrath of a certain person in our shul who keeps track of which chairs were inside before Shabbos and which ones weren't, and he clearly didn't partake in the l'chaim, because then he also wouldn't have been able to tell which chairs were there before and which chairs were there after. Zok the hele Gemara weiter. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan also agreed to Shmuel that we can keep track, and there's no need to disallow carrying from Chatzer to Chatzer, even though one of the Chatzeres, the people are able to take Keilim from their homes into the Chatzer. Now the next line, Rashi is not Goyis, but Tosfos is. So it's a simple line. Is there any reason to make a distinction between if people made an Erev or not? In other words, Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Shmuel. So it's 2 against 1. Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel holds Bein Yirvu, Bein Lo Yirvu, you're allowed to transfer Keilim from one Chatzer to the next, and Rav holds not. So Maskav lo Reb Chisda, lo Shmuel lo Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Chisda asked Akasha to Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. Based on what you're saying, Yoru, people are going to say, Shnei Keilim b'Chatzer. You can have 2 Keilim that are sitting side by side in the Chatzer. One started off in the Chatzer, one was brought out from someone's house, and then Shnei Keilim b'Chatzer achas, and Zeh mutter v'zeh aser. How you talking? How could you allow such a thing? People will get mixed up. Zok the Gemara, no, Reb Shimon l'tamei, we're talking here Reb Shimon. The Tanya Reb Shimon holds people don't get mixed up. The loy gozer. And thankfully, at the end of the Masechta, most of the brises and mishnayos that the Gemara brings, we learned already. So it's easy. Ditnan, I'm going to illustrate a mishnah that we had earlier in the Masechta, where Reb Shimon made it pretty clear that people don't get mixed up. Ditnan, Amar Reb Shimon Lama Dover Doima. What does this compare to? And the mishnah's topic at that point was if people were koine shvisa, each one a couple of amos away from each other, and the question is who can eat together. So it's compared to l'sholosh chatzeres hapsucha zu lazu. So let's call these chatzeres Chatzer A, Chatzer B, and Chatzer C. And there's a direct access from Chatzer A to B and from B to C. But they're also psuchos l'rishus harabim. Each Chatzer has their own direct exit to the rishus harabim. And what happened was ve'irvu shtei achitzonis iminem tzois. And Chatzer A made an Erev with B, and Chatzer C made an Erev with B. But Chatzer A and Chatzer C never made an Erev together. So what is the halacha? He mutaris imayan. You're allowed to carry from Chatzer B to A and from Chatzer B to C. The hein mutaris imah. And you're also allowed to carry from Chatzer A to B and from C to B. But between A and C, asur and zu and zu. Now you might say, how are you going to remember which keli started where? Sagt the Gemara, Rab Shimon holds v'loy gazar dilma also lafuki mani dahachatzer lahachatzer. And Rab Shimon's not concerned that you might get mixed up and you might end up taking a keli from chatzer A to chatzer C. We're not worried about that. So hakanami in our case, even though there might be Keilim in this chatzer that started off in someone's house because there was an Erev in this chatzer, loy gazrinon dilma also lafuki mani debatim lachatzer. We're not concerned. So Shlomi Feintuch asked me a kasha today that I don't have the answer to, that I'm reaching out to everybody to help me. He asked, this is pretty clear that Reb Shimon doesn't make Gzeira. So how could Rav in Reb Shimon learn that he doesn't make Gzeira? Reb Shimon is pretty explicit here that he doesn't make Gzeira. So I don't have the answer. I thought Rav is Talu Polik. Maybe Rav passes like Reb Shimon, but he himself adds on that chomer, but maybe Reb Shimon himself wouldn't hold of that chomer. But if anybody can help me, I don't know.
No, we said the halacha is like him, right? So he's saying
Rav
it
said
is
the
like
halacha
him,
is like
except
Shmuel.
with
The halacha is like Reb Shimon. And then
Right.
V'hushal Irvu. So V'hushal Irvu, is that Rav is saying that's what Reb Shimon holds, or is that Rav's own opinion? But maybe Reb Shimon would hold only even if it's Irvu.
I understand it to mean it's like him except for this prat.
Except for this crowd. So in fact, Rav is arguing on Reb Shimon in that crowd.
Yeah.
Okay, then it makes sense. And Rav's a
That's how-
Tana, Rav could argue on Reb Shimon. Okay, so then it makes sense. Okay, Zok to Gemara. Much of Reb Sheshes. Reb Sheshes wants to weigh in on this machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Reb Shimon Omer. So now we know for sure we're talking in Reb Shimon. Echad gagois, echad chatzerois, echad karfifois, rishus achasein lekelim sheshavsu b'soichan, v'loy lekelim sheshavsu b'soichabayis. Reb Shimon said that as long as the kelim were in the chatzar before Shabbos, it's a free for all. You can take it from the chatzar to the karfif to the gad, everything's open. But he also says if there's kelim that started off in one of the houses that's now in the chatzar, that kelim you're not allowed to move to another chatzar to a karfif, because he speaks out v'loy lekelim sheshavsu b'soichabayis. Well, the question is, how did that happen? How is it possible to find a keli in the chatzar that was shavsu b'soichabayis? If there's no Erev, how would you bring it out? We're not talking about unlawful, so it must be there was an Erev in one of the Chatzeres. If Reb Shimon's case is referring to a case where at least one Chatzer made an Erev, that's why Reb Shimon can address what's the halacha with Keilim that started off in a bayis that's now in the Chatzer. If Reb Shimon's whole halacha only applies where there never ever was an Erev between any of the individual chatzeres, how is it possible to even have this? So from the fact that Shimon spoke out that I don't allow you to transfer Keilim that started off in the house from one chatzer to the next, by definition it states that Reb Shimon is saying his halacha even in a case where there wasn't there in one of the chatzeres, and that's how one of the Keilim got out. So this is very schwer on Rav, because this seems to say very clearly that Reb Shimon holds you don't make the Gzeira. Who moisav law, who mafark law, but comes to the sudra. You know what got out? Not Keilim that you have to carry. A person was dressed, he was wearing a coat, he was wearing a hat, and he walked out into the chutzner with it. That's not a problem. Even if you're not allowed to carry, it's his beged. And then in the chutzner he got hot, and he took it off. And now he left it there on the floor. Those Keilim you wouldn't be allowed to carry over to the next chutzner. Now here, see what's interesting is here, the Gemara didn't answer Rav Tanahu Paluk. Here the Gemara wants to suggest that Rab Shimon maybe would agree to the Gzeira. So based on what David said earlier, is that maybe Rav is arguing on Rab Shimon. From this Gemara, you see the Gemara is trying to make Rav consistent with Rab Shimon. So Oy Bazoi, if we're trying to make Rav consistent with Rab Shimon, that would suggest that the Gemara understood Rav as explaining Rab Shimon, not arguing with him. I don't know. But this answers a very important kasha that Shlomi Feintuch asked last week. We said, according to Reb Meir, the Gemara wanted to know, according to Reb Meir, if you're allowed to carry from Gag to Gag, why can't you carry from Gag to Gag if one Gag is 10 tefachim higher? What's the difference? So the Gemara answered, there's a gzera, that if we let you carry from one gag to another gag, and it's 10 tvachim high, then you might, in a Rosh Hashanah, if you're in a Rosh Hashanah, and there's a post at 10 tvachim high, you might put something on it. And that's going from a Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So in order to get people out of the habit of putting things up on shelves, we ask you that even in a Rosh Hashanah. First, let me find out what type of exer is that. How would someone even be carrying something in the Rosh Hashanah? What business does anybody have carrying something in the Rosh Hashanah? You're not allowed to carry in the Rosh Hashanah. So they should ask her putting something on the shelf in the Rosh Hashanah because someone might be carrying Rosh Hashanah, which he's not allowed to do anyway, and then he might put it on top of a post. That was, let me find this kasha. So some people answered, Rabbi Bolog answered Chaim Tzvi when he asked over this kasha, that you're allowed to carry Daled Amos Rosh Hashanah. So maybe it's a guy who's carrying Daled Amos. No, but for that, you should make a gzera, never, even in a Rosh Hashanah, to put something on a shelf. So there was a big conversation going on the WhatsApp chat that people were complaining about. We even lost a member of the WhatsApp chat because he couldn't handle the notifications that kept on popping up. And Akiva made a macha, no more politics on the chat. We're only allowed to talk and learning. And then Shlomi Feinduch sent in that maybe it's speaking where a guy had a coat. He had a coat that he wore, and that's what we're talking about putting up there. So I responded that wouldn't work, because if you were wearing your coat from the Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah and you're walking around with it there, so there was never an akira. So even if you take it off and you put it on top, that wouldn't be usher, because there was never an akira made. But based on this Gemara, it's very fair. Maybe he walked out with his coat from the Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah, and then he got hot and he took it off in the Rosh Hashanah. And now it's there on the floor in Rosh Hashanah, he took it off, and now he might lift it up and put it on top of a shelf.
The problem is all of the ballots that are stuffed in the pockets.
Gewaltig. Gewaltig. Sagt der Heilige Gemara weiter. Toshma. I'm just thinking to myself, not that it might happen, but in the oddball chance that someone by mistake clicks on this video in 10 years and hears that, he might not know what it means. He might not get the joke. He'll have to look it up in history. Zok the Heilige Gemara, Toshma, Anshe Chotzer, the Anshe Mirpeset. This is again a case that we're very familiar with. You had two stories. The lower story, the apartments walk right out to the Chotzer. And there's an upper story where there's a porch, and all the upper apartments walk out to the porch. And Sheshachlu v'loy irvu. They didn't make an erev. They didn't make an erev between the upstairs and the downstairs. But all of the residents of the upstairs made an erev so that they could share in the porch and put their stuff on the porch. And all of the residents who lived on the main level made an erev so they could share in the chutzner. But the people upstairs and the people downstairs did not make an erev to join each other. So then we learned in the Mishnah, Kol shegavoya yutfachim limer peset. If there's a post that's 10 tfachim high, that's within reach of the merpeset, then that's its easiest use is to the people of the merpeset, because it's level to their floor, and therefore we'll say that that's for the exclusive use of the merpeset, and the people of the merpeset could put stuff on it, and the people in the chotzer cannot put stuff on it. Pachas mikam. What if you had a post that was near the merpeset, but it wasn't 10 tefachim high, it was only 5 tefachim high, which means that the people for the merpeset can't use it so easily, then lechotzer. And we learned back there in the sugya, which Rashi here reminds us, that it's equally difficult for me to lower something down. If I'm on the merpeset, it's equally difficult for me to lower something down onto it as it is for someone in the chotzer to lift something up and put it on it. And therefore we have equal access to it, which makes it also to both of us, unless there's an erev made. When do you say this halacha? When do you say this halacha that the Anshe Merpeset can use theirs and the Anshe Chotzer can use theirs? Is shahayu elu shel rabim ve'elu shel rabim ve'irvu. There's multiple people who live on the second floor, and there's multiple people who live on the bottom floor, and they each made an erev with each other. So the people who lived upstairs made an erev with each other, and the people on the main level made an erev with each other. The irvu elu latman ve'elu latman. Or, alternatively, we could be speaking about a palace. Or shel yechidim. One person lived on the entire upstairs, and one person lived on the entire downstairs. Again, they don't have to make an Erev within themselves, because if I'm the only person on the floor, I don't need to make an Erev with anybody else on my floor. What if there were multiple people living on the first level, and there were multiple people living on the second level, and nobody made any type of Erev? So then the halacha is Gag v'chotzer v'achsader umurpeset kulon rishus achasei. Anything that's in your apartment, in your bayis, of course, you may not take out into the chotzer. But anything that was in the chotzer before Shabbos is free game. You could take it anywhere. You could take it to Gag, chotzer, achsader, merpeset, anywhere you want. You can take it. Zok the Gemara, time of the lo yirvu. The Brisa says beferish. Davka, if they didn't make an Erev, you're allowed to carry this chayfetz that's in the chotzer anywhere you want. Ha'irvu, if either the upstairs made an Erev together or the downstairs made an Erev together, loy, then you would not be able to carry a chayfetz that was found in the chotzer anywhere. Haman, so that's very shver on Shmuel, because this seems to indicate that if either party made an Erev, and now it's possible that there will be Keilim that started off in a home that's now found in the chotzer, it will not be mutter to carry around. And according to Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, it should be mutter to carry around. Zok the Gemara, Hamani Rabbanon Hi. If you notice, this Tashma doesn't start off with Reb Shimon. So it doesn't say clearly who this Tana is. So who said the Tana of this Brisa is Reb Shimon? Maybe it's going according to the Rabbanon. As we discussed, if we look back at our chart, the Rabbanon also agree that you could take it from Gag to Chotzer, from Chotzer to Gag. So that's very consistent with this Brisa that we quoted, because this Brisa just says Gag v'Chotzer v'Achsad v'Pesach Kulu Shosachas, basically going up and down. So this would fit with the Rabbanon. What's good about the Rabbanon? The Rabbanon don't hold like Reb Shimon, who hold that there's no need to make a gzeira. Now, if you remember the mission that we quoted with the three cheseres that were side by side, and B made a Erev with C and with A, but A and T didn't make an Erev, Reb Shimon said, there's no problem. A can still carry to B, and B can still carry to C. And we're not geyser that A might carry to C. But that's Reb Shimon. The Rabbanon in that brisa was geyser. And the Rabbanon in that brisa says you can't even carry from A to B. You can't carry from B to C. You can't carry anywhere. Because if we let you carry anywhere, you might get confused and carry from A to C. So maybe this brisa is going according to that Rabbanon, who holds you do make a gzeira. But Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel said their halacha that you're not geyser. They said that in Reb Shimon, and this brisa is not Reb Shimon. Dekanami, I'm going to prove it to you from a completely different angle that this brisa is not consistent with Reb Shimon. Rather, it's only consistent with the Chum. Look at the range of where you can take this chayfetz to. It's limited. Look what it says up here. It's limited to either a gag, a chotzer, and a chsad or a merpeset. What about a karfif? What about a mavli? How come it doesn't say there? Because only Reb Shimon allows you to go into a karfif. If you look back at our diagram, if I could find it, if you look back at the diagram, it's only Reb Shimon who says everything's wide open. Reb Shimon said you can go to a karpif, you can go anywhere. So if this brisa was Reb Shimon, it should have said you can go to a karpif too. It didn't. It just said you can go to a chotzer. So therefore, it makes sense to say that this is not Reb Shimon talking, rather it's the Rabbanan talking, and the kula of Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan that you can carry from chotzer to chotzer, even if one of the chatzeres made an erev, that's according to Reb Shimon. So they can not like only karpif of mavish mamida. Tashma. So now that we had the case earlier, we had chotzer A, B, C. Now you have A, B, C, D, and E, but the same arrangement. You can go directly from A to B to C to D to E, and each of these chaseres also have a direct access to the mavli. So chamish chaseres apsuch lezu lezu upsuch es lemavli. V'shakhu kulam v'lo yirvu, and no one made any type of erev. There's no erev at all. Now, if there's no erev at all, then we know right away you're not going to find any Keilim in the chotzer that were not there before Shabbos. Because since nobody made an Erev, nobody's allowed to carry from their homes into their chotzer. So the halacha is, Osir lahachnis ulahoitzi mechotzer lemavi. You're not allowed to take anything from a chotzer to the mavi, or umin a mavi lechotzer, or from the mavi to any of the chatzeres. But from chotzer to chotzer you can carry. The keilim sheshavsu bechotzer muter latatla mechotzer. Any keilim that are in the chotzer you can carry around in the chatzeres, but of a mavi osir, and the mavi would be osir. So let me read this one more time, because this word of the mavi osir seems to be repeating what the Tanakama said earlier. So let's see this again. Toshma, Chamash Chazeres Apsuchus Ulazu, Apsuchus Lamavi. V'shakal Kulam V'la Irvu, also Lahachus Lahaisi Mechatzer Lamavi and Lamavi Lachatzer. So the Chum already made it very clear that you're not allowed to carry anything from the Chatzer to the Mavi or from the Mavi to the Chatzer. Then it says within the Chatzer itself, you can carry it. And then the Brisa repeats itself of the Mavi also. So this is something that the Gemara is going to tell us soon. What extra piece of information is it trying to tell us? And at first glance, if you think about it, it doesn't say from the Chatzer to the Mavi, like it says earlier. It says Uva Mavi Aser, which would indicate that if there's a Keli that started off in the Mavi, you're not even allowed to move it in the Mavi more than $1. The Mavi itself is also going to be considered like a Karmelis. That's the Pashut way to understand these words of the Chachamim. Let's put that on hold, because we're really focusing on Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon matter. Rab Shimon is matter. Shahayer Rab Shimon Omer, and now Rab Shimon knows you can carry it to the Chatzor from the Mavi, because remember Rab Shimon says it's a free for all. You can go anywhere. You can go to a Karmel, you can go to a Mavi. Any Keilim that are found in a Chatzor on Shabbos, you can go even into the Mavi. Rab Shimon matter. Rab Shimon Omer Kozman Shehin Shal Rabim V'Shachu V'Loi Irvu Gag the Chatzor V'Achsadra Umerpeset the Karpeth Umavi everything Kulon Rishus Achasem. Dr. Gemara again. Reb Shimon spoke out V'Lo Irvu. So time Lo Irvu. Again, Reb Shimon seems to say that his heter is only if no individual chatzeris made an erev, and therefore there's no chance that any of the Keilim that we're going to find in any of these chatzeris could have originated in a house. Ha Irvu. But if an erev was made, and that means even if only one chatzer made an erev amongst themselves, it's possible that one of these Keilim that we find in the chatzer on Shabbos originated in a home, it wouldn't be allowed. So again, that's a raya against Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel to Rav. So Gemara, no. When Rabbi Shimon said V'lo Irvu in the Brisa, it doesn't mean no erev was made at all. My lo Irvu chatzeres ba'li adadi. HaChatzer ubatam Irvu. Maybe Rabbi Shimon's not saying that there was no erev at all. He just meant that there was no erev to join all the chatzeres together, and nevertheless they can still carry from one to the next. But Avada, it's possible that the individual chatzeres may have made their own erev. In fact, Gemara, come on. It says in the Brisa, let's read it. It says V'Shachu V'Lo Irvu. Lo Irvu means no erev at all. So don't start splitting it and say no means it wasn't this erev, was that erev. It was no erev. Clearly, Rav Shimon is saying only it's going to be mutter if there's no erev at all. So no, my lo Irvu lo nishtadfu. It's not talking about Eruvin, erev chatzeres, because you're right. If lo Irvu meant erev chatzeres, then it would mean sai that the chatzeres didn't join together, and sai there was no erev made internally in the chatzer. But that's not what Rav Shimon means with lo Irv. Lo Irv is talking about a completely different thing. He's talking about shitufim avuyos. It's lo nishtadfu. So all it means is they didn't make a shitufim avuyos, but it's very possible that some of the chatzeres made an erev, and therefore it's not shver, even if some of the chatzeres made an erev, and therefore it's possible that some of the kelim that you find in the chatzer may have originated in the house. We still allow carrying from chatzer to chatzer, and we're not concerned that somebody by mistake will carry this keli that originated in the house to a different chatzer. Or maybe you could say a different shot in your Shimon. And that lo iravu is Rab Shimon the devreim the Rabbanan kamalu. Remember, Rab Shimon knows you'd be allowed to carry from the chatzer to the mavi. The Rabbanan said you cannot carry from the chatzer to the mavi. So maybe Rab Shimon was making a plea to get the Rabbanan to agree with them a little bit. The Didi, Rab Shimon said, lo shana iravu, lo shana lo iravu. It makes no difference. No matter what, you're always allowed to carry everywhere. You said you're not allowed to carry from the chatzer to the mavi. At least agree to me that you may carry from the Chatzar to the Mavi. If nobody made any Eruvin, and there's no concern whatsoever that you'll have a Keilim that originates in the home, at least then agree to me that you can carry from the Chatzar to the Mavi. Amrulei Rabbanan, loy, we're not even giving in an inch. Stay Rishuya saying the Mavi is separate, the Chatzar is separate, and you're not allowed to carry from the Chatzar to the Mavi unless you made Shitufay Mavuyas. Now that's the end of the sugya of understanding Reb Shimon if we're makbid on Irvu or Lo Irvu. Now we're going to go back. Well, it's not the end of the sugya. It's the end of the sugya for now. Now we're going to go back to analyze what the Chachamim said in their halacha. So Amar Uva Mavui Aser. So that's what we pointed out earlier. The Chachamim said, Chavish Chatzei Apsuchus Lazu, Apsuchus Lamavi, V'shachol Kulam L'Irvu, Aser Lach L'Ladi Mechatzer L'Mavi, U'Namavi L'Chatzer, and then Uva Mavui Aser, which is repetitive. So Amar Uva Mavui Aser. That would indicate that if you had a keli that was in the Mavi before Shabbos, you're not allowed to carry it more than Daled Amos, and the Mavi is treated like a carmelist, where you cannot carry more than Daled Amos. Lema Messiah Reb Zeir Amarav. This should be support, a riot to what Reb Zeir said in the name of Rav. Domar Reb Zeir Amarav, Mavi Shaloi Nishtatfu Boy, a Mavi that they didn't make Shitufim Mavuyos, Ein Metaltalin Ela Daled Amos. If there's a keli found in the Mavi, on Shabbos, you're not allowed to move it more than Daled Amos, meaning we treat it with the chum of a carmelist. So, Pashtus, that's what it means, Uva Mavui Aser. Zakamor, no, that's not what it means. Ema Ulim Mavui Aser. The Brisa isn't saying in the Chachamim that you're not allowed to carry it within the Mavi, and therefore you don't have a riot to Abzera. It means you cannot carry it from the Chatzar to the Mavi. But frankly, Gemara, Hainu Reisha. That's exactly what the Reisha already said, that you can't carry from the Chatzar to the Mavi or vice versa. So why would the Rabbanan need to repeat the same halacha twice? So Gemara Mishnah Yisayra it's Strichale. The Rabbanan did find the need to repeat the same halacha twice that you cannot carry from the Chatzar to the Mavi. Now the Tango, Kipligi Rabbanan Aled Rab Shimon, where do the Rabbanan prohibit carrying from the Chatzar to the Mavi? Hanamili Hecha de Irvu. That's only if one of the Chatzeres made an Erev, and we might have a Keli here that started in a house. If there was no Erev done at all, and therefore any Keli you find in this area, you know was never in a house, maybe Moidulei, maybe the Rabbanan would be Moided to Rab Shimon. Amashmalam, the Chachamim, that no matter what, even if there was no Erev made anywhere, even if there was no chance of any Keli having originated in one of the houses, it's still also to carry that Keli from the Chatzar to the Mavi or vice versa. I guess we could stop here. And Misham tomorrow we'll start here. We're going to learn at 7, and we're also going to learn at 9.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach.